For the past 5 years or so, I've had this image on the whiteboard in my gym. This 5-part Venn diagram with the individual circles labeled tension, position, commitment, effort, and precision. In the center, where all of the circles overlap, is the word mastery, with a big question mark after it. I was searching for the principles of climbing movement. What are the base levels, the foundations of the moves that we do? Well, it isn't exactly this graphic, but I think I've found the answers. Now, I started down this road because in a session with my friend Peter Bonamici, I watched him easily do a move that I just didn't quite understand. I knew I was physically strong enough, but I couldn't make it work. And it wasn't a complicated move. It just exploited a hole in my understanding of movement that I didn't even realize was there. And over the next several months, I made up variations of that move instead of just practicing that one move how we would in a performance scenario. And I began to realize that as long as I kept some of the elements, I could create nearly infinite variations of the move that all felt nearly equally difficult for me. And I kept digging deeper until I finally hit something solid, a possible foundation. And then I took that knowledge and I dug for more, experimenting with moves that I'm actually good at. What was at the root of those type of moves? And here's the thing. After going down that path, I just can't be happy with the idea that the foundational principles of climbing movement are a set of thousands of different techniques that we have to memorize, because in reality, each one of those techniques arose as a solution to some movement puzzle, long before we gave it a name. And if you watch World Cups, it's not hard to see that this is still happening. New techniques are constantly being invented. So does that mean we're still expanding the foundation of climbing movement? No, of course not. There are themes that run through all of the moves that we do. But I did realize that to make this work, I would have to draw division between technique and skill, something that movement researchers are already doing. Because even though we use the words interchangeably, they just aren't the same thing. And so technique is the move or moves we choose, usually things we already know the names of, but not always, in order to solve whatever movement puzzle is in front of us. The technique we choose is usually dictated by the orientation of and distance between the grips, as well as our action capacity. That's how strong and mobile we are. And we employ that technique, then choose another for the next move, and so on. And skill, on the other hand, is the ability to adapt those techniques to a variety of situations, using the principles of the movement as a guide. Let's use heel hooking as an example. Not all heel hooks are created equal. Just because you know what a heel hook is and basically how it looks does not mean that you're skillful with the heel hook. Within this one technique, there are infinite possibilities of how to place it, position it, use it to move or to lock yourself in place, and so on and so on. And being able to recognize and then adapt those various uses requires skill. Now, to be skillful, we have to understand intuitively the principles of the movement itself. You'll hear some people say something like, heel hooks should always have a pointed toe, or your legs should be externally rotated, or some other rule. And first off, these aren't actually rules, and they certainly aren't principles. They're just methods of adapting the technique to some specific situation. And if you're skillful, you'll understand when to employ these adaptations to the technique, not because you've tried and memorized every possible variation. You haven't, I assure you, but because you'll understand the foundational elements that go into making a heel hook work in any given scenario. And this is why good climbers can find microbeta on the fly that it takes you weeks to find. It's why Janja Garnbret or Tomoa Narasaki can walk out to a World Cup boulder and figure out how to do a move they've never seen that the setter just made up a few days earlier. We might be mystified at their understanding of their bodies and how they fit into the spaces between holds, and there's no denying that they're some of the best in the world at doing that, but it's not magic. And it's not because they somehow already have these techniques programmed into their head. Their coach didn't anticipate the new move that the setters would invent for the next comp and build them a simulator. It's because they're skillful. They understand how to use global thematic principles in combination to make any movement solution work, even the solutions that they're inventing right there on the spot. And we can do that too. And now don't get me wrong, I'm not saying we shouldn't learn all of the existing techniques. I want them all. I love the names. I love making up my own names for things I've not seen or heard of before. And during performance, we're always very quickly going to go to the individual techniques because it's how we communicate. And we'll dial in the details of those techniques. However, when it comes to learning, I do think it's a mistake to dive headfirst into a specific technique, either too early or too often. Now, I think we can look at it in a similar way as a grade pyramid. Sure, it might seem faster to get to the next grade if you spend a bunch of time projecting that next grade. But time and time again, we see that using this method often results in the next of the grade taking just as long, and then the next again. Whereas the person who spent an equal amount of time shoring up the level they were on instead of jumping forward can suddenly do multiple of this harder grade in short order and leap past the person who took that shortcut. And this is no different. Yes, it's certainly faster to send the thing you're working on now if you just dial in all of the microbeta, build a replica to train on, and dedicate your time to those specific moves. But you're going to have to do the same thing on the next project and the next, and it's going to eat up entire seasons. Instead, we can dig a little deeper and find the foundational skills we need to work on instead of a specific move. And this allows us to better understand what's required of us during any move. Then when we do get on a project, to work out the microbeta more efficiently and send more things faster. What this comes down to, like much of climbing training and tactics, is that we have to make a distinction between practice and performance. During performance, absolutely spend time working out all of the subtleties and microbeta. But until you're a high-level climber, you'll be better served spending your practice time building more robust, more adaptable, foundational skills, gaining a broad understanding of movement that's going to result in just needing a few tweaks to render a specific movement solution successful. So the question is, how? Is it even possible to look at all of the individual techniques and break them down to their foundational principles? And for a long time, people have seemingly tried, but they get stuck at things like lead with your hips, or improve your footwork, or drive through your legs, or pay attention to center lines, or the extra lazy, you just need better technique. And I think these ideas are basically headed in the right direction, but they've all stopped just short of figuring it out. There's still 2 or 3 layers above the foundation. And even when we get down to things like trajectory or precision or balance, we're still not to the root of it. But I believe I've gotten to the root of it. And I call these principles the 5 atomic elements of climbing movement. And these 5 elements can be combined in various ways to create every climbing move there is. Every technique depends on them to work. And often when we think we're bad at a technique, we're actually just being challenged by one of these elements. And I'd also argue that even when we're dialing in the details of a specific technique in a performance scenario, say how we're pointing a toe or not during a heel hook, we're actually talking about these elements. But I'm getting ahead of myself here. Let's back up a second. I was pretty close with that original graphic on my whiteboard, but a few things occurred to me. First, that some of these pieces were inherent to the movement itself, sort of a requirement for us to meet in order to do a given move the best way for us. And some of the pieces are what we bring to the table, and they play a more regulatory role in the move. And second, that precision was actually a product of other elements, namely position and tension, of course regulated by effort and commitment. But there was still something missing, an important piece inherent to the movement itself, something that, when added to the other elements, could account for pace and trajectory and arousal levels and a bit of that precision that I had deleted. Rhythm. So the 3 inherent elements are tension, position, and rhythm. And the 2 regulatory elements are commitment and effort. Now let's go back to that heel hook example that I started with. When we're considering how to use a specific heel hook and we discover that pointing a toe or not is what makes the move work, We're actually discovering how a change in position affects our tension. These details, this microbeta, is just the manifestation of an understanding of the inherent elements, whether we know it or not. And now, I said these things occurred to me, like it was some instantaneous light bulb moment, but it took a long time. Besides the years of experimenting and exploring in my own climbing, I went through several months on my podcast talking with experts like Udo Newman, Taylor Reed, motor learning researcher Rob Gray, reading dozens of books and studies, and repeatedly asking my co-host Nate Drolet to poke holes in my theories. That led to several revelations, and once I felt good about all of the ideas, I turned it into a course that includes a way to evaluate your own movement using this system, opened it up to 50 people, and then asked those people to join me on a Zoom call and tell me all the things they thought could be improved. And then we made those improvements. We remade several videos. We reworked the evaluation. I filmed examples of the movement situations to give context. And now I'm not going to say that what I've landed on right now is its final form, but I can confidently say that it's really damn good, and I'm proud of it. And personally, I think this system and the evaluation tool are game-changing. And it's out and it's available right now at the link in the description, so check it out. But first, I want to give you a taste of how the evaluation works, because even after making it, I was pretty surprised by its accuracy. So the evaluation is a series of statements that you give yourself a frequency score on based on how often the statement is true in your climbing. And because movement changes when you're on different types of terrain or when you have a different goal, you can make it as specific as you want it to be. For instance, I evaluated my movement on the first or second go on a mini to medium length sport project. But you could do it for on-sites or long-term projects or indoors versus outdoors or anything you want. The more general your results will be. The more specific your scenario, the more specific your results will be. So anyway, once you've scored yourself and totaled up each section, you then fill in a polar chart that gives you a great visual of your scores for each element. And as you can see here, mine said that commitment was by far my weakest area. But I wrote a book about commitment. It's something I pride myself on. So initially I thought, there's no way that this is right. Maybe because I've spent so much time recently working on position and rhythm and effort that maybe the recency of those just showed up as higher. So I sort of accepted the results with some reluctance. But then I started editing the videos for the drills in the course. And there it was, over and over. I was falling off due to not committing. Tapping a hold instead of latching it. Repeatedly, pulling my fingers out of a pocket that I was clearly already in because I hadn't committed to the tension required. Half-assing moves that I've done so many times because in that moment they just didn't feel right. And to be honest, these are things I didn't really want people to see. And side note here, I ultimately compiled all of these commitment failures into a video that's in the course because, frankly, it's an important piece of this. But here's the thing. Commitment comes in a lot of forms. It's getting on the project. It's trying new beta. It's making goals and actually chasing them. I'm good at those things. That's what my book is about. But it also shows up as committing to latching a hold on the first try instead of tapping it 4 or 5 times to test the distance and tension and trajectory. It shows up as being willing to give the effort required to fight for the send, even when you aren't sure if you have the right beta just yet. It shows up as continuing to climb when your movement quality is breaking down for whatever reason instead of dropping off when things aren't perfect. And according to this evaluation and to the videos, I could use some work on these things. And even though I'm not training in the gym right now, so I'm not really doing any drills, I'm applying this lesson outside. I'm in the midst of trying to send 100 513s before I turn 50 in October, and by reminding myself on those first couple of goes on a new project that I just need to commit, I've already started speeding up my process. I did number 93 in 4 tries, and on that 4th try, I had it so dialed that I did a second lap with no rest, and I have number 4 queued up for a potential second go send. And if you're spending a lot of time in the gym right now, or you're in a training block, we aren't leaving you to guess about what to do with your results. I've created a drill matrix that at a glance can show you which drills are most appropriate for the elements that you need to work on. It covers 25 different drills, all built under the umbrella of the constraints-led approach that I've been studying the past few years, each with a new video, description, and explanation of how to fit them into your sessions. And once you're in there, inside the course, you'll get free updates forever. So as we come up with and add new drills or new ideas or an updated evaluation, it's yours. And you can reassess your movement skills as often as you like, for as many scenarios as you like. But this isn't some magic pill. You aren't going to become a better climber just by enrolling. And that's the other part of that original graphic that I got wrong. The overlapping center isn't necessarily mastery. There's a lot more to mastery than this system can encompass. But improving movement skills and technique are by far the most abstract part of becoming a better climber, and arguably the most important part. This course and this evaluation tool, in my opinion, are the best way to remove the guesswork and find a clear direction forward. That's going to save you time, it's going to save you energy, and ultimately make you a better climber faster. Now, the link to the course is in the description. If you want to watch that video from inside the course that shows all of those examples of me not committing, I'll have a link to that in the description as well.